Hello and welcome to the 9th Annual Infinite Dial Australia webinar. I'm Lizzie Young, CEO of Commercial Radio and Audio. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that we are on today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. Today we are unveiling fresh new insights into how Australians are listening and how those habits continue to evolve across platforms, devices and moments throughout the day. With record audiences, growing revenues and expanding distribution, audio is undoubtedly having a glow up. And this rich consumer data will help your brand show up in the places where audiences are most engaged and where brands are heard. Delivered in partnership with Edison Research, the Infinite Dial is the longest running study of its kind. It offers a clear view into what's changing, what's accelerating, and where the biggest opportunities lie for brands in commercial radio and audio. It's built to be practical, with takeaways you can apply straight away. And again this year, we are bringing the data to life through the interactive Infinite Dial dashboard. A big thank you to Edison, to our CRA members across Metro and Regional Australia, and a special thanks to Nine for hosting us today. Now to take us through the results and what they mean for brands, I'm delighted to hand over to our expert panel, led by today's moderator, publisher and founder of Unmade and Mumbrella, co-host of Medialand on ABC Radio National, Tim Burrows.
Thank you, Lizzie, and good morning. Well, everywhere you look, someone's got something in their ears, and not just to block out the world. Audio appears to be having a moment. So what's fueling this surge, and how exactly are Australians weaving radio, streaming and podcasts into the rhythm of their everyday lives? To dive into the data and provide expert analysis, I'm pleased to introduce today's audio advocates. Lauren Joyce is Chief Audience and Content Officer at ARN.
Hi, Tim.
And Margie Reid is CEO at Thinkabout.
Hi, Tim.
And direct from New Jersey, Larry Rosen, President of Edison Research. Larry, to kick things off, can you give us the lay of the land? What for you are the standout findings from this year's Infinite Dial?
Well, good morning, Tim. Good evening from here in New Jersey. I'm excited to be back with you all and present some of the key findings from this year's study. But first, I do want to thank the CRA and the sponsors of this study. We're so thrilled that we're able to carry this forward now for so many years. The study produces tons and tons of amazing data, so I'm just going to go through some of the key findings to kick off this discussion, but so much more is, of course, available. So first, we're going to look at this finding on the screen here about commercial radio. And this is really kind of an amazing finding, in my opinion. We've been tracking year by year the percentage of Australians, in this case, age 10 and older, who say they've listened to commercial radio in the last week. And a couple things should be pretty apparent on this graph. First of all, on the right-hand side, 62% of Australians saying they've listened in the last week to commercial radio. That's an estimated 15 million Australians, so a huge number, a huge reach available to advertisers from commercial radio. But the other thing is the trending on this page. And you can really see the effect of the sort of COVID era. The numbers were ticking down as COVID sort of changed people's behaviors. And then you can see the climb out. And in fact, we have an increase from each of the last two studies, which were 59%. Now fully 62%, more than 6 in every 10 Australians age 10 and over saying they've listened to radio in the last week. So you really get a sense for commercial radio's resilience. We can focus down a little narrower and look at just all forms of ad-supported audio. And so this graph on the bottom, you see that same 62% that you saw the previous week. And we can compare it to a couple other numbers. First, going up from there, the 23%, that's the percentage of Australians age 10 and older who say that they've listened to the streams of commercial radio stations in the last week. That equates to 6 million people. So you get a sense for how commercial radio has changed with the times, and as new ways of bringing their content across have emerged, their consumers are going with it. So people aren't just listening over the air. Increasing numbers are now streaming commercial radio. And we can compare that to the percentage of people at the top there who say they've listened to the ad-supported version of Spotify in the last week. That's 17% of Australians, or about 4 million people. So not an insignificant number, but as you can see, a number that really pales in comparison to the number that commercial radio achieves. So if advertisers are looking for a really broad reach, clearly commercial radio is a great choice. We can look even more narrowly as well at streaming radio, like we were just looking at on the previous graph. And here we're concentrating just on adults 25-54, that key demographic. And you can see our current estimate is that 1 in 3 25 to 54-year-old Australians now reports listening in a given week to the streams of radio stations. You can see that number really rose from 2022 to 23, but has continued to rise. And then this year, 2 percentage points more, from 31 to 33%, or a 6% or so gain year on year. So Australians are now understanding increasing numbers that they can consume their favorite radio content, not just over the air, but using the streams of radio stations as well. Our next finding is about the hottest sector in the world of audio, the one that gets the most buzz these days, and that's podcasting. This graph shows the trends year by year for Australia on the right and comparing it to the trends for the United States on the left. And as you can see, historically, if you go all the way back, the Australian numbers were well below the American numbers. They caught up, and over the last couple of years, they've been consistently actually a little bit higher than the American estimate. This year, we had a huge gain in our estimate in the United States, up to 55%. We had a significant gain in Australia year by year, and this is one of the key important findings of the whole study. Now, more than half of all Australians aged 10 and older told us that they've listened to a podcast in the last month, 52%. So this is a real milestone in terms of how broad in appeal podcasting has become. Another key finding relates to the in-car environment, that key environment for audio consumption. We asked anyone who'd been in a car in the last month about all the different things they might have listened to in the car. And as you can see here, people could answer any or all of these, so they add up to way over 100%. But far and away, the kind of audio that people consume the most in the car is radio. At 84% of Australians who get in cars saying they've listened to the radio and do so regularly. That number is followed by music streaming at 50%, still a strong number, but far lower than the radio estimate. Now, over a third of Australians say they listen to podcasts in their car, 36%. 29% with a CD. That still surprises some people, but a lot of people have older cars that have CD players in them. And if you have a CD player, people will continue to use the CD, or a certain percentage. And then finally, 21% saying they've used downloaded music on files they put on their phone and choose to listen to. But far and away, radio leads in the in-car environment. And one of the ways people are increasingly listening to radio in the car is using streaming. We've been tracking this year by year. 2019, only 4% of Australians said that they've listened to the streams of radio stations in their car. And look at how it has grown year by year. Our current estimate, 28%, down 1 point from last year's estimate, but still showing, huge. Maybe the last one was a little bit aggressive, still a huge number, 28%. And again, this point, the Australians are understanding that there are more ways to consume their favorite content than just over the air. And then finally, this finding about the smart speaker. And here we have another really important point. On the lower right-hand corner of this graph, you can see that now 40% of Australians say that they have a smart speaker in their home. Very significant growth over the last 2 years. 2 years ago, our estimate was 28%. And notice that our estimate is now considerably higher for Australia than our estimate in the United States. Now, owning a smart speaker is really important because people who have smart speakers tend to listen to a lot more audio. So it's another channel that people can use to consume all of their favorite content. And it speaks to just how important audio is in the lives of so many Australians that they're going out and getting these new devices to allow for new opportunities to listen. So that's a brief update of things, and you can see just how exciting a space audio is.
Well, Larry, that's a really great scene setter. Thank you very much. And nice to see Australia leading the way in some of those stats as well. Lauren, I'm going to come to you first. Something that Larry touched on there are the stats about audio certainly appears to be in growth in Australia. What do you think is driving this growing affection of Australians for audio?
I think that there's a number of reasons. I think that the last slide we saw there was about the growth of smart speakers, and I think that speaks to the accessibility of audio. So, you know, it really is a ubiquitous medium that every single Australian would have an opportunity to engage in audio in some way, shape or form. And then I think that we've really grown our understanding of how audiences want to connect with audio and the roles that the different formats play. And so what is now available for audiences is the ability to, feel connected to their community through radio, is to indulge in their own special interests through podcasting, or to, switch their mood and enhance whatever they're already doing through the use of music. So I think that, we've become really attuned to the audience and where audio and different formats can play different roles in their lives, and so they're being serviced better than they have been before.
Well, Margie, you're here as the voice of the agencies, I guess the voice of the media agencies. You're doing the buying on behalf of the advertisers. Do you think they are as attuned to audio as consumers seem to be?
I definitely think there is. We're seeing that there's an increase predicted in audio spend. The IMAA did a consensus recently.
That's the independent media agencies.
Thank you, yes. And we're seeing that there's about 60% of the agencies predicting a 25% increase in spend in the next 12 months. So
more than half.
Absolutely. So a really big investment going into, and that's both with the radio and the podcasting, so getting the total audience there. Interestingly, Mark Ritson did a study of all of the Effie Awards and it showed that an investment of 11% in radio actually can double the effectiveness of the campaign, which is pretty strong numbers.
So in other words, it's a sort of amplifying effect on
Absolutely.
a wider campaign. Larry, I might bring you back in. We are, as you've demonstrated, starting to see this sort of growth in online streaming of both radio and podcasts. Presumably that gives us opportunities around targeting.
Well, absolutely. Obviously, there's always been targeting through radio because of the different formats and the delivery of different stations and different formats. But podcasting takes it to a dramatically higher level yet. As was mentioned, there's a podcast for every interest, a podcast for every taste, and they can really drill into very specific audiences. But as the graph I showed also shows, you put them together and you're also achieving reach at the same time. So there's a lot going on there. Individual shows, again, very targeted, but you put them together and tremendous reach can be achieved.
Thank you for that, Larry. Moving on towards, I guess we're still talking about ad-supported audio, Lauren. We largely focus today on audio that brands can actually buy. Commercial radio and audio, the clue is in the title. So that's commercial or ad-supported audio. And I suppose one of the important things is that not every pair of ears is actually within reach of advertisers necessarily. How important is it to distinguish between total audience and audience that can be reached with ads in these stats?
I think that it's critical that people understand where these audiences are and how they're actually engaging with different formats. I think that the industry suffers from a fair degree of confirmation bias, and if we did, not that I've seen a survey recently, but if there was a survey done as to where the majority of media buyers live and work, it wouldn't be too far from the city centre in most metro areas. But you move beyond that, and the consumption habits of consumers are markedly different. And I think, that we all know that we're in a cost of living crisis, and some of the fastest things to go is those subscription budgets that people might have within their household. And so it's really important to understand that audiences are growing outside of the subscriptions that you might see in the likes of Spotify, because people are aware of the depth of content available beyond that subscription service, and also that the advertising can actually add to the experience of the listener. And so I think, it's important to create that distinction between ad-supported streaming services and those that are subscription-based.
And maybe just to build on that point, why does that matter so much when it comes to planning media campaigns?
I think because primarily, if you think about the funnel, the traditional marketing funnel, radio in particular is still an enormous reach builder. So you want to be drawing people in at the top and acting as a point of discovery for consumers. And as you get further down the funnel, then you can obviously target through more precise formats. But I think that if you're considering that you're allocating a proportion of your spend to, or the large share of your spend to Spotify, then really you're reaching a smaller audience than is available in the broader landscape of audio in general. And perhaps it should form part of your mix, but certainly not dominate the mix, because the vast majority of audiences actually exist outside of those subscription services.
Well, Margie, certainly a criticism I've heard over the years of media planners is that sometimes they lose sight of who the audience is and think of themselves as the consumer. So they might well have a Spotify premium account, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their audience does. How do media agencies address this? Or is there a bit of a blind spot there, do you think?
Without a doubt it is. It's an issue across the industry, and it has been for a long time. So looking at the census data from the IMAA, it shows that 50% of agencies are looking at the planning across total audio, so radio, streaming and podcasting. And with that, it means that they're tapping into the total opportunity. However, 50% of them aren't. The opportunity off this is using the data from the Infinite Dial and looking at the fact that 1 in 3 25 to 54-year-olds are now streaming online audio. So it's a huge opportunity to tap into that audience.
Lauren, I might get you to build up on that point about planning in totality for audio.
Yeah.
Is the audio industry ready to assist in that?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. If you go to the CRA website, we developed a planning tool, I think around 12 months ago now, that actually helps buyers to determine the incremental reach that they'll get by adding various channels in. And you can see that the kind of makeup of the best type of plan changes based on the demographic that you are trying to reach. So yes, I do think the industry is ready to speak to total audio audiences. And we have a fair understanding of how audio can benefit a plan, not just within a total audio buy, but when combined with other channels.
Well, Larry, I'd love to bring you back in as well. Something which I found really interesting in your presentation was talking around connected cars. When it comes to kind of just that increasing availability of connections within the car, how is that changing how Australians are consuming their audio in car when they're driving around?
Yeah, so the overwhelming evidence is that people just add to their diet. So when people are using their phones, maybe enhanced by something like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, the evidence is that people don't stop using radio. They don't stop using things they might have used in the past, like I mentioned the CD player and things like that, but they just add more to it. So people will start streaming, like I mentioned. They will start listening to more podcasts when it becomes a little bit more efficient and easier by newer technologies. So it just speaks to the sort of general story that we have here, which is there's just such a flowering of options and just so much more kinds of audio that people are listening to. Once they have it available to it, it just comes to mind more. It's more satisfying, and they listen more and more. That's what the data seems to show.
Well, Lauren, thank goodness for congestion. Thank goodness for commuters.
That's exactly right. You know, I mean, reflecting on what Larry's just said then, audio really is the only medium that has the ability to enhance something that you are already doing. So, you know, whether that be exercising or cleaning or driving or, you know, walking down the street, you add audio and it enhances the experience.
And Margie, let's get you to build up on that point. How are your habits changing when you're driving around in Melbourne? What's different?
Oh, without a doubt, the experience with DAP, like it has made the whole interference that can happen, especially with trams in Melbourne, obsolete. So people are adapting to that experience. They expect it now to be a much smoother and enjoyable experience, which is definitely happening. I thought it was really interesting in Larry's data, though, around the 36% of people that are listening to podcasts now in the car as well. It's just with the increase in the genres available and the depth of content, it just makes it so much more accessible. So those behaviours are changing as well.
Let's move on to podcasting. A stat that I was really interested to see in the presentation from Larry, Lauren, was the fact that we've now passed the point where more than half of Australians, I think the number was 52%, are now saying that they're listening to podcasts. What's driving that?
I think that podcasts, you know, Larry spoke before about how when it comes to audio, people just continue to add different formats into their diet. And podcasts have really replaced the role that magazines used to play in people's lives. You know, they satisfy the need for special interest information. And I also think that, you know, more broadly, if we consider how media consumption habits have changed, radio and audio used to be considered a medium that was a one to millions. Now we've moved to a model where it's one broadcasting to a million one-on-one interactions, and that's really what podcasting avails. So, you know, you still have that intimacy of somebody in your ears and talking to you, you know, about something that you're interested in. It just does happen to occur over many different interactions at different points in time.
And Larry, I might just get you to build up on that point as well, because I saw that the jump was even bigger in the US. Is the sort of political nature of some podcasts, is that driving adoption as well, do you think?
Well, yeah, we had an election, as I'm sure all of you know, last November, and it seems like we have our elections every 4 years, and it seems like every cycle, some new media channel gets the attention. It was Twitter in 2016, and at different times, different things have come along that have been the new advancement in communication, and clearly people refer to the 2024 election as the podcast election, and it got so much attention, the appearances of Trump and Harris on different podcasts. And it wasn't just for our national election. There were state and local elections where people used podcasting very successfully. So I think that's just the beginning of a very long trend that we'll continue to see over time. And the other thing I'll add, by the way, with regard to the growth in Australia, that can't be ignored is how much more Australian content there is. You know, the content side lagged a bit behind the US and even the UK. So years ago, a lot of Australians were listening to content that wasn't from Australia. Now there's so much dynamic, great podcasting content being created in Australia for Australians. So I think that has to be part of the growth we've seen, is they're just satisfying people more by talking about things that Australians care about more.
Well, sticking with you for a moment, Larry, another stat which I was really interested that you just touched on was smart speakers. What is driving that adoption in Australian homes, do you think?
Well, I think it's just the utility of them. You go to someone else's house, you see them talk to their smart speaker, and music comes out or audio content comes out that you want to hear, and you go, hey, let's get one of those in our home. The other thing we see in our data is that when people get one, they very commonly get more than one. So they get one to start, and they might put it in the kitchen or in the family room or what have you, and they see how great they are. And then sure enough, they say, let's get a second one. They're relatively low price points. So let's get a second one, put it in the bedroom or put it even in the bathroom we hear about and things like that. So I think it's just a matter of people encountering them, seeing how useful they can be. They're relatively inexpensive, as I said. And so that's how products grow.
Okay, well, Lauren, let's look forward. I'm going to ask everybody this question as we begin to wrap up. Hey, look, people have taken the trouble of tuning in this morning to watch this, so let's give them a little reward. What's a smart bet that brands can make on audio that not many are making at the moment?
I think that people are thinking about radio in particular as a legacy medium and not considering the fact that it's a content format. So if we have a look at some of the data again, and if you look at the slide at the moment, you can see that there's been a great escalation over the last 2 years of the consumption of radio in a live streaming mode. So what that says to us is that radio as a format, so the combination of music and talk and entertainment, is still incredibly relevant, and consumers have changed the way they are accessing that format. So to consider radio purely as a channel as opposed to a content format would be a big mistake. And I think that the brands that are thinking about total audio and the different roles that the formats actually play for people in their lives, and then considering how to connect with them through various different platforms, are the ones that are going to win.
Margie, I'll ask you to build up on that point as well. What are brands missing?
People are hungry for content. So how do you use the power of audio to get inside their ears, take the place and take the creative and bring them together? And I think tailoring creative to those environments and really building on the fact that people are engaged with the content that they're hearing, whether that's because of the podcaster, the on-air talent. How do you leverage that and really link it to your creative and to your message?
Well, Larry, you get the final word. If you want advertisers, brands, planners to take something from today's conversation and these new numbers, what do you think we should take away?
Well, to me, the main thing is just what a dynamic and powerful space audio is. It's adapting and changing. People are discovering new things. People are more satisfied and excited with what they're hearing than ever before. And, on top of how much reach all these things are delivering, there's just how powerful and potent the medium is in terms of getting messages across. It's a very intimate medium. It often is done directly going into people's ears, and it creates a powerful bond for advertisers. And so, that's what I hope they take away is, it's large, it's growing, it's adapting and changing, dynamic and exciting.
Well, thank you so much to Lauren and to Margie and to Larry for joining us, and to you, our audience, for taking some time from your day. It's always fascinating to take the temperature from the audio landscape, and in its 9th year, the Infinite Dial Australia continues to show us just how quickly things are evolving. Now, as Lizzie said earlier, the data is built to be useful. You can find the interactive Infinite Dial dashboard along with today's charts and many more insights at cra.au. For now, though, thank you again, and until next time, toodle pip.